How you doing, man? I'm Gil Roth. You're listening to a bonus episode of my Virtual Memory Show podcast. This is a COVID check-in episode where I record with a past guest of the podcast to find out how they're holding up during the pandemic. As far as how I'm doing, yesterday was one of those temporarily elongated sort of days, which is something we're all getting used to. You know, losing track of time, not getting around to afternoon coffee until like 2:30 or so, all that stuff. Last night, in honor of Adam Schlesinger's death from COVID-19, Amy and I watched Music and Lyrics, this cute 2007 rom-com with Hugh Grant and Drew Barrymore. Amy watches it when I'm traveling on business sometimes, or so she tells me, and we felt that was a more appropriate tribute to Schlesinger than YouTubing our favorite Crazy Ex-Girlfriend songs, of which Where's the Bathroom is still number one. Settle for Me is probably number two. But anyway, we could spend a while going through all those. It is Thursday, so after I finish this, I'm going to stretch and then try to run 5 or 6 miles through the neighborhood. Yay me. I also only have one chapter left in Kurt Andersen's history book, Fantasyland, which is pretty long, 450-page history of America. And I've been unfocused about reading it, so I hope to finish that today and finally get that feeling of readerly accomplishment that I have been lacking since apparently March 8th, according to my great spreadsheet of books, which is when I finished John Crowley's fiction collection And Go Like This. Speaking of, Crowley and I have to get together soon to record a conversation about that book and his wonderful new nonfiction collection, Reading Backwards. So that might turn out to be a full-length show if John and I can kind of manage that conversation remotely. Today, you get a conversation with the writer Sven Birkerts, who is checking in from Arlington, Massachusetts. Sven and I met when he was the director of Bennington College's low residency MFA program. We met back in like 2014, 2015. I'd visited a couple of times to record with writers like David Gates, who I'm hoping to reconnect with for this series. And Sven and I have stayed pals since. Sven's got some wonderful essay collections like The Other Walk and Changing the Subject. Both are from Grey Wolf, I'm pretty sure. Once upon a time, like the 90s, he was best known for the Gutenberg elegies when he had a more problematic relationship with technology, digital technology, and its effects on writing and reading. In opposition to that, and in addition to his writing, Sven keeps this wonderful Instagram feed as Cyber Burke, where he posts these beautiful and haunting photos from his daily walks and just daily experiences. I'll have info for all that in the episode and show notes. Now, as caveats go, there's some weird crinkly noise from his microphone. Tried to remove it, no avail, deal with it. Here's me and Sven. How are you dealing?
I'm dealing solidly, I think. As I, exchange messages with all my friends and colleagues, it seems we're all doing the same 5 or 6 things in our days. Keeping safe and indoors, taking our walks, trying to make a little headway with whatever work we are pledged to. Which, is a whole separate category, because I think that's possibly the hardest part if we're talking about any sort of creative work. My default... I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was going to ask, have you been able to focus and to either read or write or however else you want to characterize creative?
Well, I have a very narrowed focus, much narrower than usual, and that means that I can go great guns looking at something that's already done or going into a draft of something and, kind of working slowly through it on a line edit level. I've not been able to sit back and, draw the muse into my window and just come up with new things. So that's one thing. I guess I have plenty to do on the editing level, so I'm not at this point terribly worried. As for reading, I'm reading poetry mainly right now. It's probably not surprising. I don't feel I can commit to any particular narrative in a longer sense. I'm not really reading novels. I can read essayistic prose and essayistic prose and poetry. And if I want to get more specific on that,
I was going to say, if you cite anyone, is it going to make anyone else mad? But go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite.
Oh, if you name one person and don't name somebody else, they'll get mad that you're not reading their stuff instead.
Right. Well, in this case, we're not talking about any parts of my immediate literary life. No, I've found I'm getting whatever vitamins I need right now from very narrow bandwidth. I'm reading a lot of post-war Polish poets in translation and some prose by those same writers. It's hard to define what exactly creates the necessary right mix for what you can take in and sort of hold on to, but they seem to fit that closer than anyone else. So I'm reading, Zagajewski's poetry and Miłosz and, Sebald and people like that, people who are somehow slightly, so that's, and I'd say the main reason I read those people right now is because they manage to, on the one hand, keep a close poetic eye on the particulars of living, which we can't let go of, but they also somehow have or incorporate that slightly larger metaphysical perspective that sort of puts circumstances in a frame, in a larger historical context, I guess. So I suppose that's the gratifying part of reading. And I'm far, far too trapped in the pundit belt. I vow every night that I'm not really going to do it, but then you start in and you start breathing the air of imminent catastrophe, and then you sort of have to keep following on, waiting for the info you need and the solace you need, which is not that readily found. So
yeah, I think that's the bigger question, whether there's any solace to be had from putting your mouth over the fire hose of all this news.
Yes, I thought you were going to say put my mouth to the exhaust pipe. No, the fire hose. The fire hose is better. Yeah. So it's a sort of interesting. I mean, interesting in triple quotes, because interesting makes anything sound kind of trivial and amusing, but it is interesting to watch, both in myself and in others, how we relate to information and what constitutes too much. And, this has been my pitch forever, is that, we are, in the larger frame, we're inundated with signal. And I usually mean that, across the full smorgasbord of signals. But here you have that, it's the pipeline, as you say, and that's just, can't put your hand over it. It's just keep blowing at you. So
in that respect, are there reactions, you don't have to name names, reactions by friends or colleagues that either surprise you or seem like, oh, that's a much healthier way to approach this. Maybe I should adopt that mode?
Yeah, well, the people and they're not necessarily immediate acquaintances, but the people I envy the most are the ones who can attain that slightly higher Zen level of things happen as they need to, which I can't quite climb all the way up to that. And the level I really try to avoid, and I see much more evidence of that, is the complete sort of paranoid thing. I mean, I'm still walking down the street, I'm not doing anything clusterish, but you'll pass a person 10 feet away and they're looking at you as if you just stole the royal jewels or something. There's just a kind of, there's the creepiness of that. And I think these situations expose elements of character on many fronts. And they show you very quickly what the line is drawn between I, me, mine, and everything else. And how we become protective and how quickly we become protective. And as a father of two, I also see how very readily I worry and fret, whereas normally, I go years without particular worries and frets, but now I've got that whole part on and vigilant, So my daughter lives in Brooklyn, and we're both just, my wife and I are both just, giving her instructions every moment. She's sort of humoring us, but I know she does understand, but still, it is worrisome.
I'm sure. Do you have any literary antecedents for this? I mean, there's Camus and all that, but are there works that somehow give you a guidepost for what we're in right now? Or do you feel like it's somewhat uncharted territory?
Well, I mean, certainly disaster and loss is by no means an uncharted territory. And there's a whole vast, literature of the two wars of our, past century.
But this is different.
This is different. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
I'm not finding the roadmap that one would find in terms of a particular text that illuminates something. What I am finding that reading accomplishes, and having, spent a life as a reader, what that accomplishes is it's a place where you can go and then, metaphorically speaking, breathe clean air as long as you're able to. And then, of course, you have to close the covers and go back and, turn on Chris Hayes or whatever Chris we're watching today. But yeah, I think, and of course, implicitly, I mean, just its nature is that the project of literature, the subtext of it has always been ongoingness. And you can go back to the Dark Ages and, centuries of near oblivion, and then the recovery and reflowering of a certain amount. And that's a solace in an abstract way. It's there. I'm glad I have it, but I don't wake up immediately thinking that. I'm just aware of it in the background.
Yeah. Where it's more the waking up and thinking, I don't have any symptoms.
That's definitely there. Something that really preoccupies me. Well, there are a couple things. One is I've had a persistent sense, and usually it's sort of in those quieter hours of the night or early morning, that the so-called normal past, as of about 2 months back, it has acquired an unreality which it has never quite had. I mean, the past always has a degree of unreality. You can't quite believe that you were ever whatever. But this time it's somehow different. It's a deeper unreality. It's almost like, could that have been? Could we really have walked around?
Sven, trust me, this weekend I was going to edit one of the 2 full-length podcasts I still had in the can. And they're both from March 4th, with a couple of the translators who were organizing the Festival Neue Literatur in New York that was going to be this month. And I started listening to the way we were talking. Even at that point, we knew we need to have contingency plans for the festival, etc. Even that seemed like another country. That was less than a month ago. And it was just, I couldn't bear it. I just said, you know what? I'll do those later in April. Right now, I can't even bear to listen to what we thought was serious as of March 4th.
No, that's the astonishing thing. Yeah, we were it was really not even a month ago that at Agni we were just having really earnest sort of, not debates, but, struggles trying to figure out whether we should go to this annual AWP, conference that they hold every year. And this year it was going to be in San Antonio. And really, it was on the day we decided maybe we would fly. After all, the mayor of San Antonio suddenly declared the city an emergency zone. And with that, somehow it became very real. I mean, in a sort of practical life, like, I can't do that. I can't get on a plane now.
I had one of the retirees that I was in a running group with, and we've put that on hiatus while we're, keeping social distance. He told me the last time we went for a run, he said, I haven't been to the movies in 5 years, but now I want to go to a movie theater and I can't. It's like the moment everything was blocked, he's like, I can't go to the goddamn movies. I haven't gone to the movies in 5 years, but now I want to go. So,
I totally get that. Totally. So the other thing, the unreality of the past, I'm just beginning to digest it and wondering how that will, let's say this all,
quote unquote, goes back to normal.
I guess that's the second question. They're sort of linked, is the question of what will it mean to even use the phrase a return to the usual or the normal? Because I don't think that's going to be there. Not for us Americans of certain generations who, a lot of assumptions about how things are just being pulverized. And I can see going back to work. I can see doing this. I can see sitting around with people and drinking wine. But it won't feel like the old sitting around with people drinking wine. This will be the new.
I don't know if that's generational or, we'll say, quote unquote, intellectual.
Yeah.
Like, the NFL still thinks they're going to be holding football games this September with 70,000 people sitting in the stands. To you and me, that's not just inconceivable now. It's inconceivable from here on.
Yeah.
You couldn't imagine ever being around 70,000 people again. And they're treating it like, we'll be back to it in September. We'll be able to have a full season.
Yeah. Well, the thing here, too, is it's the little buried question that nobody knows, is just whether it's going to become recursive, and how will we know, and how will we ever feel quite clear enough and free of mind enough just to wantonly pursue things that we used to do without thinking anyway, because it lurks now. The first person in October who suddenly coughs loudly in a room, everyone's going to go right to that place, no matter what.
I hear you.
So how are you? What are your mechanisms?
As far as physical safety, I'm fine. My day job involves just phone conversations. All the business travel is canceled. I have a lobbying firm in Washington that does all of the work and meetings down there. So I live almost in the woods, about 25 miles from New York City,
I
in New
track
Jersey.
You on your running maps, so I have a sense.
I was going to say, that's the only thing I do to get out and about. Amy and I go for walks, and otherwise 3 mornings a week I go run.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise it's sitting around a ton of books. Doing this every day, it turns out, is good for me. I wasn't sure, because I like face-to-face. Like the time you and I got together, being able to see the other person and everything matters to me. So I'm getting accustomed to this style. I don't want to get too accustomed to it. I still want to me, I've been asking people, what's the moment you'll feel like things are back to normal? For me, that moment is when I can sit across a table from someone and record an episode. That's, you know, what I'm looking forward to someday. So,
well, I'll tell you a little secret. I somehow assumed, because of the laptop, that we were going to be visually in contact. So I had to clip my mangy beard, and I had to sort of spruce up a little, and then I saw that wasn't going to happen. I said, what a waste.
A friend of mine says those basically look like hostage videos. So that was my good. I feel better about it. I always say, if any of us look good on screen, this is not the job we would be in.
Yes.
So, I just figure it's better if it's just audio.
I agree.
I'll specify that to people going forward.
Yeah.
I'll let future guests know it's just audio. Don't worry. But although if you can send me a picture after this, I'll include that with the show notes. But that's my last question. Are you keeping up with the photography? I see the Instagram posts, but I don't know if those are things that were in your inventory, if you're taking new stuff.
No, I should have mentioned that. That is my sort of private daily discipline. Yeah, I have to set out every day and find a new sort of path along which something may occur, And since I'm now pretty much stuck in Arlington, I've instituted the Get to Know Your Own Town, Sven school, where I pick back streets that I've never walked on, and there are thousands of them, and I just set out and go, and if I see something alluring, I take a picture and fiddle and post, and I do, Twitter, my dark and gloomy quotes that come to mind, or little, sidebar thoughts. So that's a weird way to keep, you're not really addressing anyone, but there's a potentiality in it whenever you hit send on a photo or a tweet,
Yeah. But soon you'll start making memes and doing stuff based on bad TV shows. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, don't let me go there. I want to stay pure.
Actual last question. And we can cut this part if it turns out it's not appropriate. Your mom is still alive, right?
She is, and that's a whole saga.
Yeah, how was that? Because she's 90.
She's 92, and she is about 15 miles away in Needham. She's in a sort of residence, which is not a nursing home, but it's a, residence. And up until 2 weeks ago, I was faithful son. I would go out there 2 or 3 times a week and have lunch with her down in their dining room and catch up and talk. And then by degrees, it got harder and harder to get entrance. First, I could get in because I was a familiar. Then I had to sign papers and have my temperature spot checked. And then finally, word went out that only the most vital caregivers are allowed in. So I haven't seen her in several weeks. We talk, 5 times a day because she's so bored. She keeps calling.
Oh, yeah, she's the one who's bored. I'm just kidding.
No, you're not. I mean, yeah.
No.
Anyway, yeah, no, it's part of the weave, no question. But funnily, I don't know if it's funny, but at 92, I'm thinking, at least based on my exchanges and, knowledge of my mother, it's far easier for a person to stay in a room, and it just is a room, it's a room with a sink and a little bathroom on the side. She can't really go out, and somehow I feel from our phone conversations that she has relented to that. She somehow gets that she had to switch the dial, because formerly she would always want some action. Somebody had to come over, go out for something, and that's gone. Just like that.
Yeah, yesterday's guest was Samuel Delaney, who was turning 78, and said
wow. Yeah.
he now he understands his grandmother, because when he was young, his grandmother never wanted to leave the house, basically, and now he gets it. He's like, I think I'll be safe because I don't leave the apartment. I'm not interested in going anywhere or doing anything. I'm 78 years old. I've done enough. So
I totally get that. I'm 10 years his junior, but I'm gaining on him in that respect.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, you're aware after a while that this, obviously, I think everyone's finding this, is that there are all those things you set aside with the one day I will. I haven't played guitar for a while. I'm back playing my guitar. And I just realized today that I have boxes and boxes of various correspondence up in the attic. And I've always said, well, one day I'm going to sit down and go through these. Well, why not? This is the time.
But finding yourself in yourself?
I hope so.
Sort of,
How would I know if I didn't find myself in myself?
I don't know. Well, there's Harold Bloom, but he's gone. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Which is a terrible note, but Anyway, Sven, if you can send me a proof of life picture,
I will.
I'll appreciate it. And if you can advise me on some of the poems or poets that you're reading, zap me that stuff, and I'll include it in the episode.
Will, definitely.
Cool. Hope you're well. Hope your mom stays well, and that we see each other on the other side of this.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was Sven Birkerts. Go check out his books like The Other Walk and Changing the Subject and the Gutenberg Elegies if you want a flashback to what it was like when word processing and even internet technology was beginning to make its impact on writing, reading, art, etc. Now, off mic, we talked about how the eponymous essay of The Other Walk kind of captures what he's doing nowadays in Arlington. That is, finding streets he's never walked down and finding ways to keep the familiar world new. That makes sense. So Sven is on Twitter as Sven Birkerts, which is SvenBirkerts, where he posts depressing literary quotes and other observations. But you should really follow him on Instagram, where he is Cyberbirk, CYBERBIRK, and he posts beautiful and haunting pictures there daily. He is also the editor, I guess, of Agni, AGNI, this great and long-lasting literary magazine. He talks about an Agni experience during our session. So we'll be back daily with more of these COVID check-ins. If you want to send me an update to read on the air or have something you want to share with the listeners, let me know and we'll set something up. I'm at groth18, GROTH18 @gmail.com. You can find contact info at our sites, chimeraobscura.com/VM or vmspod.com. You can also find the link to all of these, a menu bar called The COVID-19 Sessions. And if you want to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, I'm on both of those as vmspod. And if you're interested in how I'm doing these remote sessions, I'm using Zencastr, which it's a web-based program that allows both sides to record and sends their side's audio track up so I get a cleaner signal than if I was recording both tracks myself. That is Zencastr, so no final E. Zencastr is $20 a month, but my Patreon supporters are more than covering it, especially since I'm not spending money on parking, tolls, coffee, etc. to record in-person episodes. So if you can spare anything, I don't need the money. What you should do is find the Patreons, Kickstarters, GoFundMes, Indiegogos, tip jars, or other crowdfunding models for authors, writers, artists, cartoonists, whoever. Find the people you like, find a way to show them some support. And if you cannot spare anything because you're in some dire financial straits due to this whole situation, don't feel guilty about not contributing and don't feel guilty about asking for help. A lot of people out there need help a lot more than I do right now. I am Gil Roth, and this was a bonus episode of my Virtual Memories show. Thank you so much for listening. Keep the conversation going, stay safe, and wash your damn hands.